Welcome to the mill. Today, we've got a busy one actually, haven't we? We've got
lots of things to talk about today.
Yeah, we are going to be covering food, eating disorders, allergies. It's going to be a big one.
It is. We're going to got lots of different things to think about, especially in relation to neurodivergence and how eating and food can be a different experience for neurodivergent people, right from the inside to the outside.
Yeah. So first of all, Freya, let's do our chaotic and clarity moment of the week.
Wonderful. So one of the things that I've been struggling with at the moment is kind of like food going off in my fridge.
Yeah.
So where you have things and you think, oh gosh, I'll definitely use that, or I'll definitely do that, but then you don't do it. Then you've been working hard, it's late, and then you end up getting a takeaway because it's easier than it is to start cooking. So I bought myself some big silicone bags.
Nice.
And so this is my clarity moment, and I've put lots of chicken and vegetables in there, so they're all chopped up, they're marinating, so they're currently in my fridge as we speak. So even if we're late finishing podcasting today, Dawn, I can go home and I can empty it out. Now, whether that will be a clarity moment, we have yet to know whether it will be worth it or not, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's a good one.
What about you?
Well done, by the way. So mine is, it's kind of an ongoing, rather than just this week, it's been going on for about 15 years. So what I like to do every Sunday after I've made a chicken, I keep the bones and we go through the whole routine. I then boil the bones. That bit's not too bad, that's okay. But then I drain the water, the bone broth obviously, and then I put it in the fridge to make a soup. And it's
sounds amazing.
99% of the time it doesn't leave the fridge, or if it does, it's down the sink. So yeah, it's I really want to use it, and I'm going to make soup out of it. Or sometimes my bones have been boiling in the slow cooker for 3 days and I forget, and then I have to throw it away, and then it's gone off. But I don't know why that's such a struggle for me to actually follow through with that one.
I love that both our stories are kind of like attempts at clarity, but actually just end up in chaos.
Yeah, start as chaos, a little bit of clarity, end in chaos.
Yeah. And I think both of them were food related, because we wanted to share, kind of think about how we, start off our podcast today thinking about food from lots of different perspectives.
Yeah.
So I know, Dawn, you've got some really important stats to start with off today.
Yeah. So eating disorders, Freya. So there's 1.2 million people diagnosed with eating disorders in the UK alone. Wow. Obviously that's only diagnosed. A lot of people go undiagnosed as well because of shame and whatever, but these are just diagnosed. So ARFID is probably like the less known one when I speak to people.
So Dawn, just so people might not know, Dawn, tell us what ARFID actually stands for and what it actually is.
Oh my gosh, I actually don't know if I can remember. It's the A. I always struggle with the A. So restricted food intake disorder. I can never remember what the A is. But anyway, that's 5% of the people with eating disorders. And then anorexia is 8%. And then bulimia is 19%. Binge eating is 22%. And then OSFED is 47%, which is other specified feeding or eating disorder.
Yeah.
So obviously like ORFID is a bit of a close one to me because my son has ORFID. So that is, it can be for a lot of reasons. His is actually from severe allergies and textures, but it's quite common as well in people with autism, as we know, which you'll touch on after. But that's quite a bad one, that, because it's literally to do with textures, and it can be colour of foods, it can be an anxiety to allergies, like my son's is as well. I know it's quite hard to diagnose as well because it has to be under, I think it's 10 foods that a person will eat to be qualifying.
And that might change, mightn't it? Because we know autistic people may find that there's a certain safe food that they really like for a certain period of time, and that might become a safe food, but then that might change. So I think it's really interesting when we're looking at eating condition or eating disorders and eating differences within the neurodivergent community, is thinking about all those different impacts. So we've got some really interesting figures on stats on allergies that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I think for me, it's that real kind of understanding of how eating differences and difficulties can impact the neurodivergent person that we really want to explore and help people understand why there might be those differences. As you were saying, it could be allergies, it could be textures, it could be tastes, it could be that just some foods just don't look right, don't feel right, don't smell right. And then also we know about eating disorders as well, where people are, vastly reducing their calorie content as well. And we know a lot of autistic people do that because it's an easy way of following a rule. And I know that sounds sometimes quite flippant to say it's an easy thing, but actually a lot of autistic people who do develop an eating disorder, and often it's autistic women, is they find that actually following the food rules, following the calorie counting, following, a specific exercise routine, it allows them to be extremely routine, allows their world to become extremely predictable. And they're great at following it. So sometimes that's why it can become almost like obsessional and an intense interest. And you have all of those layers that kind of can compound the eating disorder for an autistic female or man.
I wonder if also as well, just talking from like experience of what I've spoken to people about, is like autistic women, they mask a lot more than males do, don't they? And I wonder if that's anything to do with it. They want to look like what they see on the telly or the models or the, do you know what I mean? And maybe it might help them fit in more if they look like
definitely I've definitely done assessments with women who've sort of like almost spoken about their eating disorder as almost like their armor. So if I look a certain way, then that allows me to kind of like blend in, or that's my kind of armor against the world. And another thing as well, which is actually really interesting in sort of girls who are struggling with that transition to adulthood. So if you are an autistic female and you're kind of reducing your calorie content, your body stops changing because it doesn't go through, you don't get as many curves. So your transitioning body stops kind of transitioning into being a grown-up female. You might stop your periods, which as an autistic girl, you might be having lots of early struggles with. All of those things. And we also know, and this was sort of a later thing that was found in the research, that autistic girls and boys, so when you are in that reduced calorie deficit, so what you notice is your body starts to actually shut down in terms of like your emotional centers, your sensory centers, so you have less almost like of an awareness around you. So again, if you're an autistic girl, you're not particularly happy about transitioning into being an autistic woman, you don't like the changes in your body. You notice when you're in that calorie deficit, your emotions are dulled, your intense sensory experiences are dulled. It allows you to follow a predictable routine that allows you to kind of, see a predictable outcome every week. You lose weight. It becomes a really tricky thing for autistic women and girls, and it can become lifelong. And I know we've said women and girls, obviously there are autistic boys and men out there who will experience those same differences.
Gosh. So we know as well that obviously, like for myself with ADHD, I have a lot of intolerances to food and a lot of allergies, and that is very linked as well, isn't it, with neurodiversity?
It is indeed. So I've got lots of stats which I think are just I mean, again, you've made this point earlier, Dawn, that these are stats for people who we know are diagnosed. These are stats who people either with a neurodivergent condition and diagnosed with a formal kind of like GI or gut problem. So we're guessing these are probably underestimations, if anything.
Of course.
But the research suggests that about 48% of people who are autistic will have gastrointestinal difficulties. So that's almost like 50%. And if we think of that as an underestimation, so many of the people that I assess, that I talk to, are able to kind of share those experiences of something that they might be really struggling with. The research also suggests that about, in terms of allergies in autistic children represent about 11%, so 11% with, whereas in the general population, that's 4%. So again, it's significantly higher.
Maybe 3 times, isn't it?
Yeah. And even not just allergies in terms of what we eat, but also our skin allergies as well. So again, things like an autistic child is 16% compared to within the general population would be 9%.
Wow.
So again, we're noticing that, there are so many differences at play here that are going on for an autistic or ADHD or just neurodivergent person.
So interesting though, isn't it? Because like I see this in my day-to-day life with my clients, with my family, with myself. I've got eczema, I've got asthma. 2 of my children have got asthma. One of them's got eczema, severe food allergies. Like my son's got anaphylactic to nuts and peanuts. I was allergic to eggs as a child. So it just really interests me, and I do have a pattern finding brain anyway. So I see these patterns in people. I see people in my chair and they have got horrendous hay fever, or they've got horrendous psoriasis, eczema, and straight away I put the link, and then the next minute we're talking about neurodiversities, and they either are being diagnosed with something, or their parents do, or their children do, and the link is so strong, isn't it?
Definitely. We can definitely see. And I think, the more that the research looks into, how allergies, whether it be food allergies or skin allergies, and how they're related to sort of neurodiversity, you can kind of start to see that, those exact patterns that you're seeing. I mean, just coming back to ADHD, because I know you mentioned that. So, children with ADHD, they are, 2.7 times more likely to suffer from severe constipation. And that could be for so many reasons. It could be as a child with ADHD, you don't think you need to go to the toilet because you're so engrossed in what you're doing. You forget to go. It could be those interoception difficulties. There could be so many things going on there that I think it's just really important to think about. And even if we think about, allergies, again, in those with ADHD, in terms of like food allergies, again, the figures are suggesting it's between 8 and 10% compared to the general population, which is between 4 and 5. So again, we're seeing these things that are kind of repeating. But for me, the other thing that I always think about when I'm thinking about these increased figures, actually as well, a lot of neurodivergent people will struggle to actually tolerate these feelings more than somebody within the general population. So if you have, if you have skin allergies that you're itching more, no wonder then you're kind of going to be sensitive to what clothes you might wear, because it might flare up that. Your son has allergies. No wonder he's developed, ARFID or fear of food, because actually that is a real risk for him. And food becomes anxious. It becomes a scary thing. But then
food is death to some
exactly.
It's literally death, isn't it, if you eat the wrong thing? And like you say, to a child that's sensitive and anxious anyway, that is just the worst nightmare.
Just so overwhelming. And if you then add in the layer of, and I don't actually like a lot of food. I don't like the way it smells. I don't like the way it tastes. I don't like the way it feels in my mouth. There's all of those things that you're kind of, and there's a possibility that it'll make me sick, it make me ill, it could be worse. All of those layers, that it's not surprising that, neurodivergent people develop these differences, these intolerances, these kind of habits and around eating. And the other thing for me that I always think about, if I'm thinking about, the world is so unpredictable for a neurodivergent person. There's things that could change at a drop of a hat. There's things that we're not expecting. All of those things are kind of going on all the time. So if you get home and you want to eat the same meal every day because it's safe and it's predictable and it's real and it's, it's easy, then why wouldn't you do the safe thing?
Exactly.
Because everything else is going to be so unpredictable. Sometimes when I'm doing training, I kind of get people to kind of talk about, if they were making spaghetti bolognese, how would they make it? If I'm making spaghetti bolognese, so we've got an autistic child or a neurodivergent child sitting in front of us, we've got to make them dinner and we're going to make spaghetti bolognese. Now we could have 10 people making spaghetti bolognese, and it could be different. It would be so different.
So personal, spag bol, isn't it?
Oh
Everyone
my
does
goodness,
it differently.
so different. The size of the onions. Do you have mushrooms in it? Is it tomato sauce? Is it a dolmio sauce? Is it got, what are all the things? So you could have something that tastes so different. And for a neurodivergent young person or adult, that would be that's just too overwhelming. I don't know what actually spag bol is, because there's so many different versions. Tell me what a fish finger is. I know what a fish finger is, because it doesn't matter which one of you.
Or a sausage.
Yeah. Richmond sausage, a fish finger, a turkey dinosaur. It doesn't matter. That becomes predictable. That becomes safe. I know that that's going to be the same every time. So you can start to see that people, gravitate towards those things.
remember there was an incident last year. I don't know if you heard about this, Freya, or I may have told you, I can't remember. But one of the main mustard making factories in, I can't remember, India, I think, had peanuts contaminated in the mustard powder.
Okay.
So this then meant that anything that said may contain mustard powder, nobody with a peanut or nut allergy could eat.
Gosh.
It was a nightmare. I mean, it was in everything. Who thought that mustard was in so many things, by the way? It's in dry pasta. He couldn't eat McDonald's. He couldn't, like, it was just crazy. And that, for an anxious child, who was struggling with food anyway, was an absolute nightmare. It's now been lifted and it's fine. But yeah, that just one little thing just threw us for 6 months as a family, because we had to rejig everything. We had to come home, even though that packet of pasta has been sat on my shelf for 2 months before the warning. He would not eat it because it said contains mustard powder. And that was an interesting time. Bless him. And it must have been awful for him as well. I really felt sorry for him.
Yeah, trying to navigate sort of new rules as well. So suddenly there's a new rule that's
Walker's crisps. Nope, couldn't eat them.
So many things that would contain that.
And you wouldn't think mustard powder was in so many things, but it was in everything.
Oh gosh.
I know, yeah.
And you can just see those levels of stress kind of linked with eating as well. And that's one thing I kind of, regardless if it's somebody who has an eating disorder, who has ARFID, who is, just have a reduced diet because of their sensory issues.
Diagnosed or undiagnosed.
Oh yeah, exactly. I always say that, one of the best things to do is not pressure people in terms of eating. Because if we add that additional layer of pressure, then it just becomes, a battleground. It becomes additional stress. We all know if you're stressed and you're anxious and you're uncomfortable, you get that stomach ache anyway. So then trying to eat if you're feeling that way is going to be even harder. So I often think to myself, or if I'm talking to people who are trying to expand their eating, depending on for whatever reason, is have your safe food at your meals. So you're getting your calories. You know that you're having the food that you like, safe. And if you want to try it, then try, have like snack time. That is a little bit more playful, that you can try, really small things of it, that there's no pressure. If you don't eat any of it, actually, that's okay. Just because it allows you to kind of, that balance and take some of that pressure away. One of the things that when I think about kind of like eating as well, if you think about kind of all of those different layers, regardless of what it's being driven by, either a fear, an allergy, a sensory, an eating disorder, actually it's really important to kind of hold that person and recognize and validate what that person is experiencing.
Absolutely.
And then we've also thought about gut allergies as well, and we were thinking about that and thinking about how that's related to neurodiversity.
Yes, this one really interests me as well, because I have lots of gut things, and so does my eldest. So this is very interesting. I like this.
So, Dawn, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a weird piece of research that is
Brian.
very, very strange. And again, sometimes as a psychologist, I kind of think to myself, I don't know why we do this research that we do, but it's interesting and it kind of allows us to think about it. So what they did is they took the microbiome of autistic children. So that's basically their poo. And they implanted the gut microbiome of those children into mice. They then had mice that mated together, so 2 mice that had the autistic microbiome and 2 mice that didn't. And then they observed the mice of the baby mice of the different kind of microbiome. And what they noticed is those mice that were born with the gut microbiome linked to the autistic children, they actually displayed what the scientists would kind of describe as some autistic behaviors. So they were less interested in social interactions. They made they had some repetitive behaviors, repetitive kind of things going on, and they made some vocalizations as well, which
interesting
is a fascinating study to think about how the gut and the brain and all of those things are linked together.
That is so interesting. So what my brain's thinking now, Freya, is what you're saying. Can somebody catch autism from poo? Or is that not what you're saying?
I love that question, Dawn. That is a fantastic question. And I don't quite think that that's what the researchers were going with. But I think the research for me is I suppose the start of where we kind of want to think about more research to be done in this area. But I think there's lots of questions. So one, how much can we actually extrapolate from a mouse to a person? Yeah, we have to kind of think, so, how much is that actually meaningful? But also I think there's something about that cause and effect. Is an autistic person autistic because of their microbiome? Or does an autistic person just happen to have a microbiome that's different? So again, cause and effect, we're not kind of sure. So again, thinking about your question, could we cause somebody to have autism if we implanted a gut microbiome in them? One, I think the ethics committee would probably have something to say about that.
Yeah, I hope so.
But I think actually what's really interesting is that's led lots of scientists to start asking those questions.
Yeah.
What is causing this? What is the relational factors? Kind of what are all of these bits kind of going on? What are all the different moving parts?
Yeah.
And I think we're at a point now where we can do some really interesting research looking at fine details about all of these things, whether it is, an eating disorder, whether it's ARFID, whether it's allergies, whether it's gut, but how all of those things interplay, particularly in those who are neurodivergent.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So nobody rush out and eat anybody's poo or anything then?
I would suggest just as a general rule of thumb,
don't eat anyone's poo.
Yeah. No. There's just probably best.
Yes. Just in case anyone's listening and fancies it, please don't listen to me.
If you do need any additional help or support with any of the things that Dawn and I have spoken about today, there are some amazing things out there. So there is a website called Beat.
Yes.
Which has got loads of different resources on there. And there is also a website called the Peace Pathway, and that has been developed specifically for autistic people and neurodivergent people who have eating disorders. So if you want to learn more, if you want to, expand your knowledge in this area, then there's some really good places to start.
Yeah, and I will just add, if you don't mind, Freya, but if anyone who has any children with neurodiversities are worried about their child, have noticed changes in their weight, in their feeding, in their food habits, it took me 3 visits to the GP before they take me seriously.
That's such an important thing. Yeah.
And it's, I'm not bad-mouthing any GPs or anything. It's not that I'm doing that, but a consultant actually checked him over at one point as well and said, oh, he's fine, he's just growing, he just looks tall and thin. And then it was 6 months later that he was admitted, very, very dangerously low weight. And that my mother's gut just I wasn't happy. And I just kept going back. And then luckily one lady listened to me. And it was, don't let that happen,
listen to your intuition, whether
always.
It's for
your gut. Listen to your gut.
Listen to your gut, because actually, again, that's one of those weird things we now know how linked our gut and our brain are. We used to think they were 2 very separate organs, but now we very much know these 2 things are very much linked. They're linked with our production of dopamine, of serotonin, all of those things. So.
Yeah, and that's why, Freya, when you eat an ice cream, we get brain freeze.
There you go.
That's how I know they're linked. That's how I taught my kids anyway.
I love it. All right. So we shall finish there.
Yes.
And we will hopefully see you again on another podcast. Yeah. Again, if you have got any questions, please write them in the comments or anything else you'd like us to cover. As always, we've loved talking to you, and we'll speak to you again soon. Take care.
Bye.